Last weekend, Governor Cuomo once again called for the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. Anyone caught with less than 25 grams of that substance would not have it put on their criminal record. And that's good for some people, but it has left medical marijuana advocates wondering why the governor has not come to their aid as well. A bill legalizing medical marijuana as a state-controlled substance has already passed the Assembly on several occasions, and with 5 Democrats forming a coalition with Republicans to control the Senate, the chances of this passing in that House have improved. Critics, however, say that the two issues are completely unrelated. Senator Diane Savino is the sponsor of the bill in question. She is joining me now to talk more about the issue. Welcome back to Capitol Tonight.
Oh, nice to see you again, Liz.
It is great to have you here. So you guys, and when I say that, I mean you and Assemblyman Richard Gottfried, who has also been on this show and has been carrying this marijuana, or we call it MedMar, bill in his house for many years, are reintroducing a new and improved bill.
Yes,
is that right?
We are. Hopefully by the end of this week, we will be introducing a new medical marijuana bill in New York State, and the bill reflects some of the original language that was in the bill that Assemblyman Gottfried and Senator Duane have been working on for years, but it also now has included language that reflects what has happened in the 18 other states across the country. You know, we say New York is a leader, and sometimes we're a follower. Well, we're somewhere in the middle on medical marijuana right now. And the benefit of that is we can now look at what other states have done, where they've made mistakes, and we can reject them and look at the best practices and incorporate them, and that's what this bill is going to reflect.
Okay, before we go any further, just to be clear, there are some states that have decriminalized marijuana for recreational use. We are not following in their lead.
No.
Okay.
We're not talking about recreational use of marijuana at all in this bill. This is purely about medical marijuana that has been, where a patient has been certified by the Department of Health, been recommended by their physician, and they have a particular underlying condition that has been proven to be benefited by the use of medical marijuana.
So what has changed then? Because you and I, and also myself and Assemblyman Gottfried, have spoken on numerous occasions about the former version. So what's new?
Well, in the former version, you know, there was some discussion about allowing people to grow their own marijuana, allowing hospitals to grow some in their basements. None of that language exists in the bill anymore. And part of it is a recognition that medical marijuana in and of itself now is an industry. And if you look at what's happening in Colorado, and you look at places like Montana where they treat it like an industry, and it's a growth industry, no pun intended, there, you know, you have to have it highly regulated, highly restricted, controlled, and you have to, you know, issue licenses for who's going to grow it, and you have to have, you know, video monitoring of the facility. So it's a lot different now than the original bill was, which really reflected I think the intent that medical marijuana could benefit particular patients and that they should be able to have access to it, but didn't really put much thought into how we would develop this as an industry.
So there are two things that I think people are most concerned about when they're opposed to this bill. One is that people who are not really sick are going to get a hold of it in some way, and I think that most often people point to the system in California where it is perceived as very lax, right? So that's the first problem. So what safeguard is in here to prevent that?
Well, first and foremost, we will not be California. California is the worst practice model. We will not be reflecting California in any way, shape, or form. We are going to be adopting a very strict seed-to-sale regulation model here, where every plant will be accounted for. We will have a barcode. We will know from the seed to the sale. Every patient will have been certified by the Department of Health. They will have a card that identifies them. They will be recommended by their physician. Their physicians will be registered to distribute this. The facilities will be regulated. They will be licensed. There will be the dispensaries will be equally licensed. There will be local input from local governments as to where they would be cited in the state of New York. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of oversight and regulation on this.
So, but there's nothing that you could do about, I don't want to say unscrupulous, but maybe some doctors who might have a broader description of what this should be prescribed for than others.
No, in the bill, unlike other Schedule II substances, which are legal in New York State only for the purposes of being prescribed by a doctor to a patient, we're actually going to list the conditions that we believe should be a doctor should consider a patient for. Unlike, we don't, right now we don't do that with OxyContin. We don't do that with Vicodin. We don't do that with Ativan. We don't do that with any drugs that doctors can write a prescription
for. But arguably those are actually more potent, one might argue. So why would you do that? Just to make critics more comfortable?
Unfortunately, sometimes you have to make the critics comfortable, because we are doing something that the federal government, or we're recommending that New York State do something that the federal government still considers illegal.
Yeah,
so we have to treat it differently. It can be a problem if you don't tightly regulate and control it. So again, you have to look at what is the situation in states where the federal government or the Justice Department has been very aggressively going in. What's missing there? Oversight and regulation. California, Montana. So we reject their model of the more laissez-faire approach to medical marijuana, and we adopt the more restrictive model like Colorado, like New Jersey now, like Connecticut, which is up and coming.
We're surrounded almost,
absolutely.
Actually. So, but do you think that with the recent changes in marijuana policy, both at the recreational level and at the medical marijuana level, that the Obama administration will be changing its mind sometime soon?
Well, we would hope that, you know. Obviously, we would all like to see the federal government change their approach to this, but we can't wait for them. You know, it's just unfortunate that they're dragging their heels on this. And so we want to go forward. And we want to go forward with a plan that's going to prevent a lot of intrusion by the federal government. Because once we do this, we'd like patients to actually have access to a substance that has been proven to provide relief to them.
Okay, so the Assembly's not the problem, I don't believe.
No, probably not.
The Senate, the issue is, and actually the IDC, of which you're a member, and you guys have all been here, et cetera, put out sort of like a laundry list of its priorities, and this wasn't on there.
Well, because the IDC, while we're a unified conference on many things, we don't agree on everything.
I'm shocked.
I know, it's amazing. But so you don't want to put something on there as the agenda that you don't have the absolute support of everyone. Now, interestingly, Senator Valesky supports it. Senator Carlucci supports it. I support it. Senator Smith is 90% of the way there, and the person I had to do the most convincing was, ironically, Senator Klein.
Okay, but did you?
Yes, I have. I've finally gotten him to understand what we're trying to do here, and he spent some time meeting with advocates and talking to them, and he's in a much more comfortable place now than he was in the beginning.
Okay, so you're a very convincing person, obviously. You got everybody on the IDC on board. Now you have to get the Republicans, and most importantly, the governor. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, the first way I get to the governor is convincing the governor is convincing the rest of the Senate. If the bill were to come to the floor today, it would pass. But it would pass with not as many Republicans as I would like. And I think there's also a misconception about how many Republicans are opposed to this. There are more of them in favor of it than not, because they look at this as a way to provide compassionate care to patients who are in need and who want another option. Do I have all of them? No. My job is to get as many of them as I can, and we've been having meetings, we've been discussing, and the bill right now reflects some of the input of the members of the Republican conference who said we want a tighter, more regulated model. We want to avoid California, and so we're making progress with them. And you saw recently Senator DeFrancisco, in the Syracuse Post-Standard, say that he has now been convinced that this is something that New York can do safely.
So the governor, I mean, do you believe there's a disconnect in the governor's marijuana policy, which is how I started off this whole discussion?
I don't know if I would say it's a disconnect. The governor's responding to a different crisis. He's responding to the crisis of young people, particularly young people of color, being stigmatized by being stopped and frisked and finding small amounts of marijuana on their person. And that's as you know, it's in your pocket, it's only a violation, you take it out, it's a misdemeanor. And that misdemeanor conviction can follow a young person through their entire adult life. So he's responding to that issue and saying it's time to stop prosecuting young people for this minor offense. And that's fine. He's not saying that he thinks young people should smoke marijuana or shouldn't smoke marijuana. He's just saying that we shouldn't punish it so excessively when they are found to be in possession of it. It's a completely different issue than this.
But just to close this, I mean, the people who are waiting, who are made into criminals when they smoke something for relief and they say they can't use Marinol and they say for whatever reason, they feel like they're in crisis too, don't they?
Absolutely. And now my responsibility is going to be, one, collect enough support for this in the Senate and be able to sit down with the governor and his people to make them understand that what we are doing here is giving patients an option that they currently don't have in New York that will provide relief that they currently cannot obtain from the Schedule II substances that they can get from their pharmacy.
And the chances of this before the end of the session?
I'm very confident this year.
Okay, you're a very confident person, Senator. We'll have you back. I thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.